Hello, this is Ian Griffiths, and this is the Armed Forces Resettlement in Conversation podcast. Welcome my guest for today, which is, I hope I get this right, ex-Colonel David Richmond CBE, who was in the
Royal Regiment of Scotland.
Regiment of Scotland, yeah, that's right, the 5th Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and you had sort of slip up there, David. And he is now the Director for Veteran Affairs at the Cabinet Office. So welcome, David, and thank you for coming on the podcast and giving me a bit of your time to have a chat about resettlement and all things to do with veterans.
Pleasure, very good to be with you.
So yeah, I always do this with every guest, and I start off just sort of by talking a little bit about your service, when you joined up, what you got up to during your service. It seems that you had a pretty sort of prestigious career within the army, and when you left. So
I joined the army in 1986.
Okay.
Went to Sandhurst then, pretty much straight from school, give or take a month or two. And I served for 26 years and I loved the whole lot, actually. You know, I mean, I look back on it very fondly. I mean, like anybody else, there are times you liked more than others. But I really enjoyed it. I think I was of the generation, and we were lucky, I think, where when we joined, there was lots of stuff to go and do. You know, we served on operations in lots of different places. And we were engaged, with a sort of changing world from, the Cold War days. My first posting was East Berlin. East Berlin, there, Freudian slip, West Berlin rather. At the end of the Cold War, which is a very peculiar existence. I think if you said to people these days, there's a major city in the middle of Europe which is divided in half by a wall, they look at you as if you're mad. But that was the situation. And by the time I left, we were, the Cold War is finished. We had fought campaigns in Iraq twice, in Afghanistan. The Balkans had been going on through the 90s. And a whole host of other things. There's no need to list them all, but there was just an awful lot going on. And I really enjoyed it. Met some and worked with some brilliant people of all ranks, all backgrounds. I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever about my military career. Yeah.
So you came out as a colonel. You left in what year did you leave? Sorry, David.
Right. Yeah. I came out slightly hastily in the when I was CO in Afghanistan in 2008. I managed to get myself shot, which was not part of the plan. And essentially that resulted in 4 years of reconstructive surgery and rehab, and then I was medically discharged in 2012.
All right, okay, yeah. So you'd already you surpassed the 22-year mark anyway. You'd already done that, and you've had this really sort of lengthy military career. You've been all over the world, and fought in many different combats. When you left, what was your transition like? It's a little bit different from an officer's point of view, isn't it, compared to a soldier or a sergeant or somebody of the lower ranks coming out of the army.
I think, firstly, my transition, I think, initially was really easy. Was it easy? Mentally was the harder bit. The physical transition was actually the easier bit. I think because I'd spent 4 years in the medical system, mentally I'd left. I think I got to a point where I had what I describe as my eureka moment, when I finally recognized life had changed and I wasn't really effectively going to go back to service. And I then planned on leaving mentally. And I fell into a role at Help for Heroes as their first recovery director. So I literally handed my ID card in the office I was about to occupy as the director of recovery at Help for Heroes.
Yeah.
So that bit, the physical bit, was easy. I think mentally it takes you a bit of time to transition out. And actually, I suspect even now, how many years later, 8 years later, I still look back and find myself speaking a language some people don't understand, or hankering after sometimes maybe a slightly less PC world than the one that we outside the services. I say all that in the, I was lucky in that transition. I went straight into a job which was great for me, and I really enjoyed it. That was great. And where I was going to come back to is there are clear differences in the challenges between a private soldier transitioning and an officer of varying ranks, but there are also real similarities.
Yeah,
and I know lots of quite senior people, well, not even necessarily senior in rank, but people who are getting on in age into their 40s and 50s who are transitioning out, who are officers, and find it really hard.
Yeah.
Because they're changing life. I mean, it's a full scale change of life for them in the same way as it is for a private soldier or sergeant major.
Yeah, I think what I sort of, from being the host of this podcast and the custodian of the Facebook group and just talking to veterans on a regular basis, because I don't earn any money from it. I just like to talk to people about it, and I like to sort of, I got a message off one of the ladies yesterday, Jenny. She'd been going through resettlement. I've known her for about 12 months now, and she's just landed a dream job at Barclays, and she messaged me to say so. And I had a tear rolling down my cheek for Jenny yesterday because she took time out to message me about it. But I mean, I talk to that many different people about it, and it's not just about finding a job. No. That's a small percentage of it in the grand scheme of things. I mean, when you left, did you have to relocate from where you was? Did you stay in the same house, or
we managed to? I moved into my own house. I did that after I left. I stayed in my quarter for a short time after. Yeah, and we had the same old challenge of we were running to the end of my service. We couldn't find a house we wanted to live in, and we were just getting to that. Well, I mean, are we actually going to find a house we want to be in, or are we going to rethink this whole plan? And then, lo and behold, with weeks to go, or less, in fact, a couple of weeks to go, house came up, which I'm now in, and we moved only 20 miles down. Not even that. It's probably 15 miles down the road from where my last quarter was.
Oh, so that's quite sort of good for you in a sense that you didn't have to sort of. I know a lot of the guys that I've spoken to have, if you're based like I was based in Portsmouth. I didn't own a house. I lived on board the ship, so it wasn't that bad. But when I left, I moved back to Merseyside, which was like, it was a big sort of uproot to move back to Merseyside, and it's the other end of the country and everything else. And luckily, I had a lot of family up there. But some of these guys, if they've met a wife or a husband, I don't know, for example, somewhere in Newcastle upon Tyne or something like that, and they've got to relocate to where they haven't got a support network around them. That brings obstacles with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we had done a bit of thinking ahead, because when our girls, we did the thing, you get your kids get to a certain age, and then the boarding school was the choice we made. And I think when we started to think through what that really meant, we cut a long story short. We picked a school, in fact, two schools between the prep school and the senior school, in an area we thought we wanted to relocate to.
Okay.
So we'd started to develop some network of friends and things over here before we left, not knowing that actually in the end, my last quarter would only be down the road. That's the way that bit worked out. But I think one of the things I'm conscious of is in a different part of my life. I do a little bit of support work with professional athletes who are transitioning.
Okay.
And they can be from the worlds of rugby or netball or basketball or athletics or whatever it is. There's a whole range of different sports, and they face a lot of the same challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges that they face that is the same for the military is for our careers. We've been identified by what we are rather than who we are. We've been identified by that uniform, and that rank that's stuck on the front of it, and the colour of it, and the cap badge, and whether you're a matlow or a crab or a pongo or whatever it is you happen to be. And one of the key parts, I think, and they as athletes have been identified, many of them since they were children, being the nature of sport, have been identified as a really good runner or a rugby player or a basketball player or whatever it is. When you stop doing that and you're going to go and do something else, you need to know who's underneath the uniform. Because if the person who's underneath the uniform is going to go and lead the rest of their life doing something else.
Yeah.
Another bit which I think is really important that I recognised, I think, really too late in some ways, but I recognised and I hold a true belief in now is that even that small number of people who serve 22 years or more, and in the overall number of people who leave the armed forces every year, that's a tiny number of people. But if those who leave at sort of 22, 23, 24 year point, if they joined at 18, they're only 40 when they leave.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
So 40 in military terms is quite old. 40 in civvy terms is the middle of your career.
Yeah,
and
you're
a 40-year-old, you've still got more of your working life left than you've completed. You're not even halfway yet. And therefore, that sort of understanding that at some point, inevitably, you are going to have to do something else, needs to sort of play a factor in your thinking as you get into the sort of past the 2 or 3 early years of your career. I'm not one who subscribes to plan it from day one, because I don't think that's in any of our minds when we're 18 or 19 or 20 years old. No. But it should start to come into your mind as you get into it a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, once you sort of get past the half pension stage, 12 years, you're kind of over that peak then, aren't you? And you sort of, I mean, what you would say, if like the example that you yourself gave, then you'd be what, 28 then?
Yeah.
If you were planning to leave after 22, so therefore, when you get to 28, you have got a bit of sort of sense about you. People start taking you a bit more seriously, and you probably are gonna want to start making that plan for when you leave. So yeah, I'm one of my biggest tips for people who leave, because I made the mistake of not making a plan because I thought I knew it all and I was a very young man. Is to make your plan early. And there's a lot of people who don't do that, and it's pretty scary. I can't really say anything because I'd be a hypocrite really, because I didn't do it. But that's my biggest tip to people who are leaving. So moving on to after your the military career and the transition and everything else, what is your role now? I mean, I already know what it is, but just for the people who are watching and listening.
No, I'm the director of the Office for Veterans Affairs in the Cabinet Office.
Yeah.
And the Office for Veterans Affairs is a new organisation which was established last October, so October 2019.
Okay.
And so it's still really new and getting up on our feet properly. And the whole idea behind the office is to provide a real focal point in government for veterans matters, and to help coordinate the work across government, because it's all done in different government departments. We're in the Cabinet Office, which I think is a really good thing, because, and I say we're not, it's because we're not in the MOD, not because I've got any issue with the MOD. I was part of it for so long, but because I think that speaks to the fact that supporting the nation's veterans is the nation's role, not just the Ministry of Defence's role.
Yeah.
And actually, strictly speaking, they don't really have great influence or own many of the policies or services that support veterans anyway. Yeah. So being the Cabinet Office is great, and I think it also speaks to a notion that the government of the time really wanted to see change. Because if you didn't want to see change, then there's no need for an OVA.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
They're looking. They've got an ambitious vision, and it's to make the UK the best country in the world to be a veteran. And I think that's a really good vision, because it's aspirational. You can get there as long as you can mark your steps and compare yourself with others, which you can. And it's short, and you can remember it. And it's not like these 10-line visions, which none of us can remember because it's full of waffle.
A big stack of papers, a big folder full of papers.
And that's what we're aiming to do. And that doesn't mean, and I know in some people's minds that means, oh, well, you're going to compare yourself with America or Australia or Canada or Germany or France or whatever it is. No, we're not. Not in that way, not the way that is implied. What we are going to do is we're going to take the services that we provide for veterans, and we're going to compare the services with those provided in other places. Because every country has got strengths and weaknesses about how they support their veterans.
Yeah.
And genuine strengths and genuine weaknesses. And what we want to do is be the best when comparing strengths with strengths.
Yeah, sure. So like just sort of doing the age-old SWOT analysis and sort of working out where the strengths are, and having a look at the strengths of the other countries and what other nations do for the veterans, and emulating that or doing better for our, which
absolutely. And I think the other bit which comes with an aspiration to make the UK the best country in the world to be a veteran is that cannot be delivered by government alone. And personally, as a veteran, as well as the director of the OVA, but as a veteran, I don't think it should be done by government alone. Because when you joined up and I joined up, we joined the nation's armed services. We didn't join the government of the day's armed services, whoever that was in 1986. I can't remember. That wasn't what we joined, and therefore, when you are representing your nation around the world, doing whatever it is that you do, there is there's that unwritten agreement that's talked about often in military circles that if something goes wrong, there'll be a safety net to catch you, and that safety net is something I think should be provided by society and the nation at large, not just the government of the day.
And I think as well, you know, if it is done by government alone, then, you know, it hasn't got a military personnel in there. Well, the great thing that we've got is yourself as the director of, you know, the Office of Veteran Affairs, who is, you know, your ex-army. And we've also got Johnny Mercer, who's back in the veterans now as well, which is also, he is also ex-army. So those two positions of strength are filled with people who have the knowledge to make these things happen. So, you know, from my point of view, you know, I'm an ex-Matlow looking at it from an outsider and thinking, well, you know, they've had a look at this, and who better to put in those positions than people who have been there and done it and seen everything that there is to see, really. So yeah, I'm quite excited about what is going to happen in your sort of department over the next sort of 5-10 years.
There's a huge amount of work to be done. There's a lot of good we can do. I think, I wouldn't pretend. I think you're right. I've been through a transition. I've experienced it. I know lots of people who've experienced it. And I wouldn't pretend to know everything, because I don't know everybody's experiences, and and I haven't tried to access all the different services that different people have. We all have our own experience of it. Yeah. But what I hope it does bring is a network of connections and contacts with the serving and the veteran community. That means we can get that feed into us about where it's going right and where it's going wrong, where it can be better. And use that really to develop the services and the support for them. And I'm also absolutely certain that I guess, and you and I hadn't met face to face until just now, I suspect you did not join the Royal Navy in order to be treated differently when you left.
No, I didn't. And you know, I joined the Royal Navy because I wanted an adventure. I wanted to escape. I wanted something different for myself. I just wanted an adventure. I was a young man, and that's what I wanted to do. And the only reason that I did leave was the birth of my son, and I was so far away and stuff like that. And I had an emotional sort of attachment to that. And that's the only reason that I left. I probably would have done my 22 if I hadn't had children at the time.
No, I think that's right. And I was to say, I didn't join to be treated as somehow special when I left.
Oh, no.
That sort of, that notion that we're a special case, or we mustn't allow this notion that we're a special case to form. We're not a special case. Yeah. But we are asked to go and do things nobody else in the country is asked to go and do at times, and therefore there needs to be a recognition of that and a network of support there if and when we need it. So I don't think it's about making veterans special cases. It's about ensuring they're properly supported and looked after where they need it. And the fact of it is, 14,500 guys and girls leave the armed forces every year.
Yeah.
less than 10% of those need support as they leave or once they leave, and a few, an even lower number than that, need ongoing support. That doesn't mean they're not important. They're really important, and it's really important we get that right. But it's not reflective of the majority.
And here's a point as well that one of my other guests, who his name is Jack Hughes. I don't know whether you may be not connected to him. Anyway, Jack is a big advocate for resettlement. He's written a book. It's on Amazon, things like that. And he made a very, very valid point that. So your career was very, very much different to mine. I never went into any battlefields or anything like that. I sailed around the seas, seen some very nice places, did a bit of, things that were unpleasant, i.e. defense watches and stuff like that. But I never got shot or anything like that. So, or shot at, or my life wasn't at risk through being in a war zone or anything like that. So, I think, and well, this is what Jack said, and I agree with him, that it can't be the same sort of resettlement process for everybody that leaves. It needs to be sort of, because if I got the same resettlement as yourself, or vice versa, it's apple for orange, isn't it? People need different levels of support when they're leaving, based upon what service they've actually done. So I'm guessing, yourself, when you got shot and everything else, and, I won't ask you too much, but there was an element of there must have been some traumatic stress after that, or did you deal with that okay, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, in that regard, I've been really lucky. I don't think there's been I can't think there's been any real enduring impact to it. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to deal with emotionally, but I think for me it was more my sort of emotional equilibrium was to pop for a bit in quite a short period of time. But I think that plays more to my character, and I was then absolutely focused on going forwards, not on going backwards. Really think too much about I tried not to overthink what had actually happened, because there's nothing you can do about it, and overthinking it is not going to change it. But that's just that's just the way I am. And that's not saying I'm stronger or weaker or somehow better than the next guy. It just
affects people in different ways, doesn't it?
You're wired different ways. That's the way it is. You're absolutely right. And I think resettlement and transition are personal things. And we all take into it our own expectations, our own aspirations, our own baggage as well that comes with us, and all those sort of challenges along the way. And somehow the system, which has to deal with 14,500 people a year, I think also needs to support the individual needs of people as they go through it in as best they can, and because what we're really trying to do is set people up for success in stage 2 of their career. Or for some, it might be stage 3. So you're personalizing it in some ways important. But I think also it's only when it's as much when you leave the services, or probably more when you leave the services than when you're in it. You recognize that although your experience of military life was very different from mine, because we were in different services and had fundamentally different roles.
Yeah.
And although there are shades of this, different shades of it, we fundamentally believe in the same things. We fundamentally hold true to the same sort of sets of values. We were prepared to go and fight at war, in combat, whether it be a ship in your case or standing on my feet in my case, and all those sort of things. We were all prepared to do that. And because we were prepared to do that, we have this sort of shared value set that becomes a sort of a connection. And that doesn't mean to say we like everybody. And you'll know there are guys in the Royal Navy you really were mates for life, and other guys you'd rather not spend much time with. And we're the same. We don't. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that shared experience, shared belief, shared culture, values, all that kind of stuff, that does not exist in civilian life.
Yeah.
And what I think guys and girls leaving the services, I don't think of generally, this is a very general statement, generally aren't good at, is tapping into that network, because we're everywhere. You call me and say, any chance of doing a podcast? Yes, of course there is. Why? Because you're a veteran, I'm a veteran, we're going to talk about veteran stuff. There's a connection. Have we ever met? Did it matter? Not a job. If somebody picked the phone up to you or sent you an email or a text or somehow got hold of you and said, Iain, I'm getting out the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, I'm looking to settle up in Liverpool, or I want to get into the line of business you're in, could I have a chat? I'd
my phone number, I wouldn't even answer them with anything other than my phone number. Do you know what I mean? If somebody messaged me that question, I would just send them my mobile number straight away.
So people in transition, use the network. We're everywhere. And if anybody else the brush off, you probably don't want to speak to them anyway. And I think getting the brush off would be the exception, would prove the rule. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I totally agree with that statement. You know, anybody who is putting the notice in or signing off or planning to sign off in the coming couple of years or whatever it is, start making your network now. Because if you start building a network on LinkedIn, and say if you had, I don't know, 20 people a week for the next sort of 3 years, you're going to have a huge sort of network for when you're ready to leave. And when you're coming out saying you want to be a project manager or wherever you want to work, you want to go to Amazon or wherever it is, you want to be a builder, you've already built that network up on LinkedIn, and you've been doing posts here and there and engaging with people, which is huge. But, you know, some of us, when we're in the forces, we are in our shell a little bit. We're in that bubble, aren't we? We haven't got the need for a network because it's all on our doorstep. But yeah, it's about making that plan for later on when you do leave. So here's a question, and that's, what is your understanding of the needs of junior ratings and early leavers? Such as myself, I left as an early leaver. I wasn't entitled to any enhanced learning credits or anything like that.
Well, I think you've immediately put your finger on one of the ironies of the system, isn't it? That the guys who arguably need most help get least because they haven't served very long, and the people who've served a long time get most help, and arguably many of those don't need much. But then it would be almost being nigh on impossible to turn that around, because you'd then be punishing people for long service and not short service. Or not supporting long service rather than punishing them. But I do think the people who early service leavers have a particular need. You know, those guys and girls who leave during training have a particular need, or very soon after training, and that might be helping orientate to what they actually want to do. You're getting over the sort of either the failure or the rejection of their first choice of career. Understanding qualifications, training, education, all those sort of things become really important. I think we get a lot of feedback from people around the needs of junior rates in transition from conversations we had through, and our connections into the charity world, into the transition world, into businesses, because it's as important. It is as important for people to find to be able to speak to future employers in a sensible, meaningful, constructive way, and to understand what employers are after, as it is for them to identify where they want to live and all those sort of things, and houses and accommodation. So I think we've got lots of routes into us in terms of giving us a real feel for that. Does it mean we understand the detailed needs of every guy or girl leaving? Of course it doesn't. But do we understand the themes that are in there? I think we do. And I think that, one of the reasons actually we created the Veterans Advisory Board, which sits at the top of our chain of command, if you like, to use the military terminology, is that we brought into that advisory board 13 people. Half of them are veterans, half are not. This is all quite deliberate.
Celebrities is in there, isn't there? I've got a list of the people here. Isn't Nick Knowles one?
Yeah, he's one.
JJ Chalmers. He was on Strictly Come Dancing, wasn't he?
He's still on Strictly Come Dancing. Don't write
is he? All right.
Yeah, he's been doing his sequins and fake tan. So we've got half are veterans, half aren't. We've got a military spouse on there. We've got a couple of guys with charity backgrounds. We've got 2 or 3 with business backgrounds. We've got a mathematical psychologist who works in big data and human emotion. We've got a psychologist. We've got one of the world's leading academics in if not the world's the leading world leading academic in veterans affairs. We've got the LGBTQ community in there. We've got a Gurkha in there representing the non-UK. We've got people in there. We've got a guy from a sports background with the comparisons and bring a different perspective to it. Because what we really wanted to bring into the room to help us understand this are multiple perspectives, some of which are totally new to the veterans arena.
Yeah.
Get away from that sense that.
Well, the likes of Nick Knowles, he is a big sort of advocate for charity work and stuff like that, isn't he? He puts a lot of his own personal time in and efforts into raising money for different causes. So I think it's a great thing that you've brought, because you could just throw a load of veterans in there.
Yeah.
And it'd probably just be a big argument, to be honest with you, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would. I mean, I do. I mean, and you'll be as aware of them as I am. There is that relatively small minority who are incredibly loud about telling us how easy it is to solve everything.
Yeah.
If it was as easy as they suggested to solve everything, it would have been done years ago.
Yeah.
It just, the very fact it's not done means it isn't as straightforward as they think. Now, that's not to take away from their passion, not to take away from their motivations, not to take away from their personal experiences or any of that kind of stuff, all of which are valid. But I think it's for a whole host of reasons. It's a lot of the things that need to be resolved or improved are complex. For a whole host of reasons, some of that will still take time. But the one thing I will say, and I say this as much as a veteran myself who's been through some of the system, a lot of the system, as I do as the director of the OVA, is some of the support provided to the veteran community in the UK is already amongst the best in the world. And you need only scratch the surface of some of the systems elsewhere to see it is, some of it, amongst the best in the world. There's still lots of things to do. There's still lots of things we can learn and lots of things we can bring over here and things to improve. So I'm not saying in any complacent way, job done. It's not. It's nowhere near done.
No.
But I do believe that some of the provision already is world leading, is right up there with the best. It's easy to forget that when we're chucking rocks at the rest of it.
Yeah, I think, well, it's in any course of any sort of walk of life, and whatever you do, you're never going to please everyone, are you? It's especially with 14,500 people leaving per year.
Yeah.
And those 14,500 people from even the last sort of 20 years having a say, you're always going to get a percentage of that amount of people who are going to have a bad taste in the mouth for one reason or another, or something hasn't worked out for them. And usually I find, and this might be a bit controversial, it's usually down to lack of efforts on their own part, that they've got a bit of a sour taste in the mouth. And then they start having a moan at other people because they haven't. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that's my.
Inevitably, some of that. I think there's a lot of good people, capable people, really well motivated, who are working hard to continually improve the situation for veterans in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back over the last 15, maybe 20 years, the improvements have been extraordinary. I remember a time when I was actually working in the MOD. I was still serving, and I was in one of the operations directorates in the MOD, and which every now and then I needed to go in uniform, combat, because I'd be going off somewhere. And if you walked into the MOD in those days in uniform, people looked at you as if you had two heads. That was the Ministry of Defence. Now you can walk around, people in uniform the whole atmosphere around it is different. The provision for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen who are coming out of the service, the support in and out is different. It's a quantum leap better. the amount of government provision has really stepped up compared to what it was. Things have really shifted forward. It doesn't mean to say we're at the end of the journey yet. We're not. We know we're not. But if you take this as a journey and not just a snapshot in time, you'll see that the arc is going the right way. We're still on a good flight path to hit all the right things.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I think as well, it's a never-ending job. It's going to be a never-ending job. You're never going to get to the point where it's going to be complete. There's always something that's going to change. The world is completely changing all the time. Put into, if you just look at what's happened over the last 8-9 months, we've had something that nobody could have ever predicted. And if you were leaving the forces in that time, it just made the problems that you had anyway leaving, or the obstacles that you did have, 10 times bigger than they would have been. So we've had to tackle
we tried to react to that in a helpful way, so we immediately to help inform lots of longer term and subsequent decisions, we commissioned really quickly King's College London to do some research to help us understand how COVID-19 was impacting on the veteran community. We're starting to get the feedback from that now. We get that really quickly because that provides us with solid data and evidence that we can use to make decisions, not hearsay and secondhand stuff. And that's what we need to make decisions. And we did that quickly. And then there was 6 million quid distributed into the charity sector to help support essential services. Now, in the big scheme of things, people say, well, 6 million quid is not very much. Well, 6 million quid is 6 million quid more than they would have had if they hadn't been given anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's at a point when the whole charity sector in the UK was really struggling. I think there's a host of different things have been going on, and all the charities have been working really hard to adjust their services. Your government services have been adjusted to support. And of course, as a veteran in the UK, and this is the benefit of our system, is that as a veteran, you're a citizen, and as a citizen, you're entitled to all the social security benefits and support that anybody else is, according to your eligibility. And then you've got extra stuff. So it's often forgotten that we've got all this baseline standard entitlement that you would have in any event before you add on the veteran stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, that has been a massive obstacle for everyone, and not even just veterans, everybody. Right. So here's a question. I'm really excited to ask you this one because I do ask everybody this question, and and it's a bit of a magic wand question. If you had unlimited funding, so if Mr. Johnson rang you up one day and went, right, David, I'm going to give you whatever you want, or Rishi Sunak I'm guessing would be on the end of the phone, what would you like to see put in place with regard to resettlement for our veterans?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? I would like to see a situation where we had employers who were as key. Put it around another way, actually. Currently employers are reaching into university courses because there are certain graduates with certain qualifications that are really sought after.
Yeah,
and they're chasing them before they've left university. I'd love to create that situation for armed forces leavers. That's not going to be the case for everybody. But for a lot of people, we could do that. I think I'd love to do that. I'd love to have a situation where society at large, but also employers in particular, recognize that people leaving the armed services come with more than just leadership and teamwork, and they turn up on time and all those sort of stuff, all of which is true, but actually see that they're getting out of that 14,500 every year. Plumbers and electricians and brickies and plant operators and port operators and pilots and doctors and dentists and nurses and communications specialists and operational planners and and on and on and on. We just keep going. Those are the people going in, and society recognizing that and seeing just what a huge benefit, and the skills and the experience and the qualifications they bring in have a value, and they see it for what it is, and they respect the service, but they also not only respect the service, what they've done, but understand what they have yet to, what they can still contribute. And I'd love to see families locked into the whole transition system from the start, so families aren't just a sort of, and partners aren't just an add-on. They're in it from the beginning. You know, we only serve because we have supportive and robust and resilient families who've sacrificed a good bit of their lives to follow us around the world. Now let's support them through transition as well, not just the service leaver.
Because it affects the whole family, the women, the children, you know, the wives, the husbands, the children, everyone who is involved, even the parents of the person who's leaving as well, you know, all the sort of the close relatives, friends, and everyone. So just touching on what you said there, you know, sort of people getting employers headhunting people coming out of the services. I think some of that could be done pretty easily just through translating the skills that people in our services develop, translate them into civilian language, or, you know, civilian qualifications. So I know that there's different things where you can sort of, if you're a warrant officer and you've done certain amounts of leadership and management courses, that translates into a bachelor's degree. Am I right in saying that? Or you can pay a little bit of extra money and it translates over into a civilian degree.
Yeah, I mean, there are transferable qualifications. I think we've got a lot more work to do on ensuring that military qualifications across the board are meaningful and have meaningful civilian equivalents, and that you gain those at the same time. And I personally find it ridiculous that, I mean, I'll use a slightly extreme example only to illustrate the point. You know, if you're a pilot of an RAF Airbus, you can't leave the RAF and fly a civilian Airbus because you don't have a commercial license. Well, to my rather simple infantryman's brain, it's the same Airbus flying in the same skies alongside the same aircraft and landing at the same airports. So why does he have to go and retrain?
There should just be some sort of
there are other examples in lots of other career areas that are the same, and I'd find that whole, but also we need to make sure that at much more normal levels, that if you've got a qualification, I don't know, say a health and safety, I'm going to pick the wrong one inevitably, but say you're a health and safety inspector, you can not only translate that qualification in military life into the civilian qualification in England, but also in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, who also all have the different qualification boards, and therefore it is meaningful, and it is transferable, and you take it with you. There's a huge amount of work to be done in that, but I think if you get that right, it's a huge enabler.
Okay.
And I have to say, I'm somewhat surprised it hasn't been run to ground and finished already, but it hasn't. But we'll be getting on with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've talked about the OVA and how, right. So, you know, within the military, I know you've left now, but you're still working in a sort of in that arena. How long do you plan to stay in your current role?
That's an interesting question. I don't have any immediate plans to leave. You know, I think whether it's in this role or in something similar, you know, I would like to remain involved. I mean, I think for the foreseeable future, you know, I think that you know, I feel that having enjoyed a military career for so long, I'd like to be able to support people now as they come out, and that, you know, there's a bit of giving back and continuing to serve the community I was part of. I think that you know, I'd like to think that in this role, one of the things I bring is 4 perspectives, because, you know, I served for 26 years, so I did my time, if you like.
Yeah.
I then went into the charity, so I've got a service perspective. I did a bit of time in the 6 years in the charity world. I've got a charity perspective. I worked for myself for 2, arguably more years than that, actually more than that, in the private sector. So I've worked in the business world for a bit, and now I'm in government as an official. So there's 4 perspectives I can bring to things in what I hope is a helpful way.
So you've got many different hats that you can put on from, you know, if you get asked a certain sort of question. And from just talking to you from an hour, and I know we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, it seems like it's a role of passion to you. You're not just doing it to earn a salary. You're actually emotionally invested in this sort of.
I am. I've huge. Yeah, I'm invested in it. I'm certainly not doing it for the money. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think that I really believe that when you join the armed services, people will say, actually, people would say, the armed services have to reflect the society from which they came. And I agree with that up to a point. And the point at which I stop is that the average Joe on the street is never asked to go and stick bayonets in the Queen's enemies, or the Navy and RAF equivalent are doing the same thing. And it's quite right that they are never asked to do that. That's entirely the right thing to be. But because we as service personnel, be they male, female, Army, Navy, RAF, whatever your role is, are there to close with and kill the Queen's enemies, that makes us different. That's a different calling. That's a different ask. I still think back to as we looked around the apron at Rise Norton or wherever it was we flew to Afghanistan from. We knew that not everybody was going to come back. We knew that some people would be coming back with bits missing or holes where there shouldn't be any. And yet you still get on the plane, you still go. And that's the same whether you're in the RAF, the Navy, or the Army. You know all those things. That comes with the turf. You're all willing volunteers. So it's not that it's a surprise to find that out. You know that.
Yeah.
That, I think, takes a special sort of person, a special sort of attitude, a special sort of organization. And much as we moan about our individual services from time to time when we are in them, and they don't get everything right, the values they stand for, the things they do, the tasks they complete on behalf of this nation, and the role that they fulfill as part of the fabric of the UK is something I think we should hold very special. And I do. And the people who come in and out of it are people who I think should receive the respect and support of the nation for doing it. Not necessarily any more than a nurse or a doctor before people start chucking rocks, but that should be recognized, because what they do when the sky goes slightly dark and the world starts tilting in its axis a little bit in a way we weren't expecting, places them in a position where they accept mortal danger as just part of the day-to-day role. And I could see, in Helmand in my time in 2008, guys and girls went out of the gate every single day knowing that within the hour they would be in a complete ding-dong with the enemy. Guys went down to the Falklands on ships knowing that the following morning when the air attack started again, they might be at the bottom of the sea. They knew that. Similar stories with the RAF too. That takes a special type of person, and those people who leave the services deserve, as a consequence of that, proper support when they go. And that's what I'm in this for.
Mate, that's beautiful words. That's that I agree totally with everything that you've just said there. Mind blowing. Right, I've got a few questions that people have put in the comments, David. So I'm just going to put them to you quickly before, just if any of them. Right, so a couple of people have asked, how do the Office of Veteran Affairs help veterans? That seems a pretty common one. I think we've covered quite a bit of that in the.
Yeah. But I think what I'd say to that is, do we, as an Office for Veterans Affairs, deliver any services to veterans? No, we don't. We're not a service delivery organisation.
Yeah.
What we do is we work with organisations who do deliver the services to make sure that they're continually improving, and then over a period of time, we do become the best country in the world to be a veteran.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's answered that question. We're getting slated here for not answering any questions by Ben Lewis, who's very, very sort of rudely plugged his business in the comments.
Well, I can't see any of the questions anyway.
So, I think that's it.
There we go.
Yeah. Right, okay, brilliant. Well, I think that's it anyway, David, and thanks so much for coming on and spending your time with me today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. towards the end there, you made me well up a little bit with your words. I'm not going to lie. I thought that was sort of the way that you've put that was just brilliant, and I totally agree with everything. So yeah, thanks for everyone who's been watching on LinkedIn Live and the British Armed Forces Resettlement Community Facebook group. This has been the Armed Forces Resettlement in Conversation podcast with David Richmond. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. It's been good to speak to you.